protein cookies today, and we're going to start with our base, which will be a protein powder. I use a pea protein. That's what I bake with all my recipes with. It's a Life Basic brand, Lifetime Life Basic pea protein, and this is going to be calling for a vanilla flavor. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 scoops of this. Now if you're using different flour, it might turn out and it might not, because it's really, I've seen some pictures of some of the cookies that I've made, and sometimes they're not as thick. So when you go with a lighter protein powder, which you might have at home, you might just need to add a little bit more. Also, look at the back, because my serving size is for 1 scoop for each protein serving. So if you have, always look on the back of your labels, always, for everything, but when you're doing a recipe, make sure that you're using the serving size in the back. Sometimes there's 2 servings per, or 2 scoops per serving, so just make sure that you are using that as far as making your recipes work, because if it's too light, it's not going to lift up, okay? So the next thing we use 2 scoops of protein powder. And I feel like some whey is pretty good, some whey protein powders are really good for baking, and then a lot of pea proteins are pretty good because it's thicker. So just really, you have to almost bake a little bit just to see what your protein powder does, and then if it feels like your mixture is really thin, before you even put it in your baking dish, or we're making cookies, so if they're just too loose, then you're going to actually need to add a little bit more protein powder in there. Just a little bit by each time, stir it in, add more if you have to, but basically you want to make sure that it's at least a good texture, so when you put it on your pan, it's not going to be all over the place, okay? So it shouldn't be like water. The next thing we're going to add in is going to be half a cup of almond flour. I like to add, actually, sorry, you're going to add 3/4 cup. I have a half a cup, so I'm using my 1 cup here, and I'm using just a half of the half a cup, so it's going to be 3/4 cup. I don't know where my 3/4 cup is, so that's why I'm using the half a cup. So, so I have a half a cup, or 3/4 cup, I'm using a half a cup. Okay, so use half for the 3/4, if that makes sense. If I just confused you, I apologize. Again, 3/4 cup almond flour. I like to use almond flour because it does taste really good in the mixture, plus it takes down the carbohydrates in your recipe. So next one we'll use will be the actual, I put everything together. I don't really separate, I don't do dry. Sometimes I do, depending on what recipe it calls for. If there's something that needs to be blended better, like an egg or something, egg whites or something like that. But obviously in this recipe, I just plop everything in 1 container and mix it and go, because I don't have time to screw around. So I'm just going to put it in there, 2/3 cup egg whites. And again, when I say I don't screw around, I use egg white container because I don't have time. I don't have time to crack each one individually. You can easily do that, so that is perfect if you have time to do that. Not a big deal. Now we're going to actually add the pumpkin, which is that's the most important part, basically. Pumpkin, okay? I'm going to add that in. That's 1 cup. 1 cup of that. And then I'm going to stir it just a little bit. Just get everything kind of going. I kind of stir in between just to see what's going on in there. It's looking good. It looks good, you guys. Okay? Now I'm going to add the stevia in. I use new stevia. That's my favorite. It doesn't have a weird bitter taste afterwards. I love it. I use it for everything. And then that calls for a 1/4 cup. You can add less or more, whatever you feel. If you don't want to add that, you can also add in some of your other favorite sweeteners. Just remember that the nutritional content on my website will not be right. So with all that being said, if you want to go onto the website at DaynaDetersFitness.com, you're going to go under recipes, And let me tell you that first before I add the next thing in. Go to DaynaDetersFitness.com, go to recipes, and it's going to be all the way down on the bottom, and it's going to be called Pumpkin Almond Protein Cookies. It'll have the whole recipe on there, and you can see how much you can have for the nutritional content. So there you go. Okay, next one. We're going to use a half teaspoon of cinnamon first. Season it up a little bit. Next one, nutmeg. Below, half a teaspoon. Half a teaspoon of that one, okay? And then next one, I usually do all the dry mixture first because I'm going to end with vanilla extract. I'm going to do the next one. I do 2 teaspoons of the baking soda, or baking powder, excuse me. And I like this stuff. It's Rumford aluminum-free baking powder. Okay, last but not least for this little teaspoon, half a teaspoon of all this stuff, except for that baking soda. Baking soda is 1 teaspoon. Half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, and then a half a teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2/3 cup of egg whites, 2 scoops of the pea protein. You can use whatever protein, just gauge it on how the texture is at the very end, okay? Just wait till the very end to see like what's going on there, okay? Then we're gonna add in just a little bit of almond unsweetened. I use unsweetened almond milk, and I use the Silk brand. Okay, and then I just put like half of it in, and then I'll just see where we're at, because you just never know. Okay, so you want to mix it in, and then you add more. So you might not even, depending on the protein powder you have, you might not need that extra liquid. That's just optional. If you feel like it needs something, you add it in, okay? And I use unsweetened almond milk, and I usually get the vanilla, so it has a little bit of flavor, because I use that for my, like just other things that I like, okay? So that actually looks really good. I don't need to add any more, so I'm not going to use the whole amount that I used, okay? So not a big deal. You don't need to use it. And it's all going to turn out great. Okay, so now that that is finished, what I'm going to do is scoop them out next. So it's all done. So what I will do is scoop it out and put it on my baking sheet. I use a silicone sheet so I don't have to spray anything, and it comes out pretty nice. I am going to use a little ice cream scooper. I think this is an ice cream scooper. I don't even know. I don't eat ice cream, but I got it, and I was like, well, this is perfect. It's like 2 tablespoons. So that is how I'm serving that up too. And then once I get these all out, and I won't do all of them because it might take forever, so I take a fork and then I just press them down, because that's what they're gonna look like when you take them out of the oven. So I just like to press them down so they turn out really cute and nice. And then you put them in the oven for basically on 350 for 18-20 minutes, depending on, you're just gonna have to take them in and out. Now, with all the protein goods that I make on my website, you want to make sure that you are letting it cool down, because sometimes it either might not taste as great or they fall apart. So letting them cool down for probably about a half an hour is best. And then putting them in the fridge and then having them covered overnight, and then you have them in the morning, they're so good for breakfast or a snack. So, again, this is a really great recipe for snacks, or you can even have this for breakfast if you have enough and pair it with something else. So I hope you enjoyed this little segment of the pumpkin almond protein cookies. And for more recipes, go to DaynaDetersFitness.com.